Hi, everybody. I'm Floyd Bishop. I work at Microsoft. The weather is a lot better down here than it is in Seattle right now, so thanks for having me. So my talk is about creating expressive characters. And expressive characters, there's lots of things that you can do pretty quickly, pretty easily with just a standard character setup. Some things you want to do is you want your character to be engaging on many levels. So think about what your character, why the character's in there. You built the character, now you want to make it real, make it your own. So a lot of characters, 3D speaking, you've got bilateral symmetry on a lot of characters. So you've got 2 arms, 2 legs. A lot of times they're modeled in such a way that they can just be flipped and rigged in such a way so you do the left side, you get the right side for free when you flip it. You don't want your animation to be perfectly symmetrical. You want to use, like they say, use every part of the buffalo. I think it was Brad Bird said that on Incredibles. You've got all this stuff. You want to use it to the best of its ability to really sell what you're trying to accomplish with the characters. Ollie Johnson said, what is the character thinking and why does he feel that way? I was on a project where we had this enemy character and he was a super minor character, and just the look of him, I imagined this whole backstory for the guy that he loved apple juice sippy boxes because the guy had this kind of like look to him where his he had this underbite and it looked like it's the perfect spot for a little sippy drink straw. So it helps sometimes to make up backstories for characters, even if it's not canon or it doesn't really fit with what you're doing, just to kind of get you in the mindset of how this guy or girl or a creature or a robot would go through the world. So like I mentioned, with bilateral symmetry, it tends to be very static. So you want to steer away from the defaults. So when you're rigging or you're modeling, it's very easy to do bilateral symmetry and get that other side for free, but you don't want that in your character. You want to stay away from parallels, so maybe when you're animating, don't have both the hands come up at the same time, maybe offset a little bit, let your character's weight get on one side or the other. And you want your character to kind of move their feet from the bind pose. So if you want to play along a little bit, if you stand up for a second, if you all stand up for a second. Yeah, it's interactive, yeah. This is the morning exercise. So just stand up for a second, don't think about it too much, and look down at your feet. Right? They're probably not perfectly parallel like they would be in a 3D model. You're putting your weight on one leg or the other. Depending on how the parties went last evening, you might be a little tired. You might be putting more weight on one side or the other. You can sit down now if you want. You've got a natural balance to your body and a rhythm to how you stand. So if you've ever watched footage of people just standing in line and you fast forward it, you see people kind of doing this all the time. It's because they're shifting their weight, they're getting comfortable. Your leg starts to fall asleep, you switch over to the other side. You want to try to incorporate that into your work as well. There are no coffee tables in nature. So you see a lot of coffee table characters in games for whatever reason, where they were modeled. You have got a character with 4 legs, they're modeled like this, they stay like that. Which you've got a rig in there, you might as well shift their weight a little bit, move their feet a little bit, put one forward or back a little bit, and get them more interesting. So there's some pictures down the bottom there. On the far left is my mother's dog, Smokey. And then in the picture with me is my sister's dog. And then there's some deer out on Whidbey Island up in Washington that are super tame. They'll eat like right out of your hand. And then on the far right there is my dog Comet, who curls up into a ball, which is the opposite of a coffee table. And so here's a quick example I built for this where that's how the character was built. The pig there over on the side. And then when I have him standing, he's kind of, it's hard to tell because he's kind of, rotund. But his feet are shifted a little bit. He's got his weight on one leg. He's standing. He's got a definite, weight to him. And this also extends to faces. So here's an image I made. It kind of looks like you ripped that front off of Elmo or something. But on the far right are parallel default eyes. You've got this railroad track thing going on where the eyes are looking off in the horizon forever. So if you look at Jim Henson's Muppets are a great example of this, where there's not a whole lot of rigging on a Muppet. You've got this, right? And there's a lot of stuff you can do, but basically you've got one joint here, one joint for the jaw, and then the whole body is one joint. It's a lot of this kind of thing and how you tilt the head and how you move to get that motion across. But one thing they're doing with the faces, because they have no control over some of the eyes on these characters, is they take the parallel pupils and let them converge on a point. So if you were to look at a Muppet from the top, you kind of get this triangle where the eyes are aiming at this point kind of far out from them. And that convergent point is kind of where most of the shots are on the Muppet Show that's kind of where the cameras are. So it's like their eyes are looking at the camera, which is a brilliant way to do it, because you can't move the eyes on a lot of those characters. So here's an example of some faces on my character. So in the example I'm going to show you, I've got a stand with my character, and I'm using Unity. I've also got these animations of the faces. I'm going to create an avatar mask for the character so I can blend those faces on top of the stand. And then you can tie that stuff to what happens in your experience. So maybe your hero character, so let's say this guy is like an NPC. He's a non-playable character. He's just standing in the world. Maybe he's going to give you a mission or tell you where some treasure is or something. And maybe you want him to react to the player character. You can tie attributes of your character to the animation values that you can then pipe in onto this guy. So if your hero character is being a bad guy and he's scaring everyone in the town, maybe the pig is going to be scared of you when you come up to him. But if you're the hero character and he's happy that you saved his village from getting turned into a luau, maybe he'll be happy to see you. So you can dial that in on top of the animation that's already there, and you can start to affect the character and get a much wider range of emotion from your character than you would otherwise. So this is basically 1, 2, 3, 4 animations, and then the default stand that I have that I'm going to then pipe it in on top of. And in Unity, this looks super complicated. And it kind of is a little bit. I had somebody walk me through it when I first did it, but it's pretty simple. So basically what I'm doing is I've got the different facial poses, and I haven't hooked up the neutral one. That's on the top there. But on the left side, I've got my blend tree that kind of drives the animation. And I've got a happy, a sad, a surprised, and a mad. So happy is, if I take that little red dot there and I move it all the way up, these are a 2D freeform Cartesian mapping, which is a fancy way of saying if you move it, it blends in the animation. So up and down will control happy and sad. Left and right will control surprised and mad. So you can then tie these values. So it's just an X and a Y that's driving that right now. But you could very easily pipe that into some other control, the health of the character, how many coins you've collected, anything like that. And then I'm using an avatar mask to maximize my acting. So I masked off the face and the ears. You can also do like the mouth and the tongue, however your character's set up. And that will allow for blending. So it'll still use all of the blend tree that I've set up for my character underneath. So he'll stand, walk, run, or whatever. But I can use this mask on top of that and change the emotion independently of what's happening with the rest of the animation. So you could have him standing there, and then he gets scared and he runs away scared. Or he sees an enemy and he's standing there neutral, and then sees the enemy, he gets angry, and then he runs toward the guy angry. And I can pipe that in independently of the other animation. Emotional changes of the face can be wired up to react to in-game events such as health, mood, kind of like what I've been talking about. You combine that with head aim or something like that, and you start to really get a super expressive character. So you can also tell it to aim the head, and you can change percentages as well. So you could have the head aim at 100% toward a character, the neck 75, the chest 50, the torso 25%. So you get this nice sequential breaking of the hero runs past, and my guy will kind of turn and look, and then when he gets to a point where it's not comfortable to turn anymore, he'll dial back to his whatever he was doing. And in the picture, it's probably hard to see because it's pretty small. I've got all of the joints that are driving the face stuff as a mask so that the face animations will only affect those joints and not everything else. And here's a little video. So here you can see him standing, and then you'll see the little red dot move, and the face changes as I'm going, but it doesn't affect the stand animation. So there's no audio with this, but basically imagine him making happy sounds, sad sounds, that kind of thing. And yeah, that's my talk. So it's pretty simple to get stuff if you take your time, look at it, and use every part of the character, use what you've got that you've already made. It's already there. You might as well take advantage of it. And just some simple things will really bring a lot of life to your characters. So thank you.
Okay, wait. Does anybody have any questions?
In using every part of the buffalo, how do you where do you set your threshold so that you're not like in heavy metal and having things constantly moving?
Right.
I mean, you want to use all those expressive points, but where's your threshold where you say, hey, I need some subtlety in motion as well?
Right. Okay, so that's a great question. It depends on the point of the game. So if I'm doing something in VR that's more immersive and I want to really anchor people into the world, I'll probably spend a lot more time making the character focus on the player more, and do a lot of things to kind of keep them alive. I'll have eye blinks. Maybe I'll have them look around. I'll do like fidget animations or idle breaks where they'll kind of, if they're standing there too long and they're doing a stand, then maybe they'll like scratch their head or crack their knuckles. That's pretty good on command. Yeah. So it depends on the experience, but at the very least, you can do some little eye dart things where that's super subtle. You don't want, the trick is you don't want to get something that's too repetitive. So if you stand there too long and you watch the character over and over again, you're going to see this pattern. If you can break it up with fidgets, idle breaks, it really adds a lot to it. But ultimately, you want to serve the needs of whatever the piece is you're making.
My name's Daniel. I'm not an artist, but I'm actually working on some game with a team of people, and I'd like to just tell them about this. But if you're trying to get more than 4 states of emotions, is there a way to add more as well?
Yeah, you can add a lot more than 4. So that Cartesian graph that I brought up, let me see if I can get back to it. Yeah, so I just made those cardinal positions. You have total control over where you place those and what those values are. So you could have a whole ring of things. And it doesn't have to be a ring either. It can be any shape. But basically, that's just the values. I'm using just an X and a Y. So I've got, that gives me up and down, left and right. You could add more than that and get different positions. So you can have kind of like breakdown blends in between, or you can have like helper blends. So imagine you were doing like a mouth shape, and you wanted the mouth to go wide or narrow, or open or closed. You could do breakdowns in between that are custom poses that when these two values blend together, it'll play this other animation that'll give you that shape that you're looking for. Yeah, great question.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm wondering about retargeting for multiple animations. You have one model and you want to do multiple animations. Does that change the way you would set this up or blend?
Not really. I mean, I do this a lot, and I don't know what everybody's technical level is in here, so if I sound condescending, I don't mean to. Condescending means to talk down to. You can put as many or as few blends in as you want. Where it gets tricky is when you start to add the masks. So like I was masking off the face and things like that. It's possible to have too many masks sometimes and they start to fight, but then you can reorder how things are set up in Unity. And I'm just using straight up Unity. I'm not using any kind of helper, third-party plugins or apps or anything like that. So you could, sometimes we'll break down the characters into sections. So we'll have like the lower half will do something and the upper half will do something else and the head will do something else. So that way you can run, or you can run and hold something, or you can run and put your hands in your pockets, which is bad because if you trip, you'll hit your face. But yeah, you can split it up a bunch of different ways. You can just have other animations blend on top. So I've been on projects where we've had a long cape, and we want the cape to blow in the breeze. So we'll have wind animation, and then that'll dial in based on the facing of your character. So the cape will blow this way, but if you turn this way, now it'll play the other animation, so the cape will still blow in the correct direction, even though you're facing the other way. The problem is then you've eliminated that cape from your other animations. So then you have to make other animations. So if I jump with the cape, what happens? Now if I jump and the cape is blowing backward, and then I jump and the cape is blowing forward, does the cape like go over my head? Does it wrap around the side of me? It starts to get kind of complicated. And I've seen blend trees that are just, looks like somebody dropped spaghetti on the floor when you look at all the lines. So it gets tricky and it can be very complicated, but it's all manageable. The trick is to do a little bit and test it, and do a little bit more and test it, and don't wait until you've got this huge tree of horrific line work that you have to try to figure out what goes where.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I just graduated and I came from a video game development club in school, and I'm pretty new to learning to 3D model.
Okay.
But do you usually animate everything in Maya and then import it all into Unity?
Yeah, I usually use Maya and then I export it as a FBX format into Unity. You can use lots of different things to get your animation into Unity. It doesn't have to be Maya. A lot of people use Blender. A lot of people use Max. It kind of depends on what your studio is doing or what you have access to. In the end, Unity doesn't care where the file came from, just that it has access to the animation data. Sometimes there's tricky things we do in Maya and then bake it down to the rig to get more complicated stuff in Unity. So I was on a project where we needed this cloth animation. And Unity does have some cloth stuff, but we wanted very specific interaction with the cloth. So what I did is I did a simulation in Maya, and then I had a joint chain in the character that was driven by spline IK. I made the spline IKs, the spline itself, I made a hair curve in Maya that was dynamic, so it would do this really nice motion. None of that would come over to Unity, but then I took that hair curve and made it a spline IK with a joint chain, and I baked all the animation down to the joints and exported that. So in Unity, it looked the exact same way it looked in Maya, but it's all joint-driven stuff. But yeah, you don't have to use Maya. You can use pretty much anything to model with. As long as you can get it into a format that Unity will work with, you're fine.
Would you ever consider using just the morph target blending stuff to animate like a simple little ball character instead of using a rig?
Just the morph targets instead of the rig?
Yeah, to try and like be more efficient.
I've
maybe?
not had a lot of luck with blend shapes in Maya, or from Maya to Unity. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Blend shapes tend to be very heavy because basically you're moving every single vertice. And they're also linear. So if I've got this cool shape here, and then like if I've got a smile and then a straight mouth, it's just going to do 100% blend back and forth. It's not going to give you that nice arc that you would get from something that you keyframe with joints. So usually I try to do joint-based stuff. I will do some blend shapes from time to time, but I try to stay away from them because they're kind of heavy. And they don't always give you the look that you're after. But actual results may vary depending on what you want to get from your project.
So that face wasn't blend shape animation stuff?
No, none of the face was blend shape. That was all joint-driven stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I usually do, for my characters, I usually do a joint for the jaw, joint for the head, a joint for each eye, a joint for the eyelids, and then the mouth, to get the expressive mouth, I'll do, let's see, a middle lip, left lip, right lip, corners, and then bottom lip, left lip, right lip. And that's usually enough to get really nice, depending on the topology of your model. If it's laid out correctly and you've got good subdivision and nice edge loop flow and stuff, you can get quite a bit of expressiveness out of just a joint rig.
Hi. I guess my question is just if I wanted to have more procedurally generated model pieces of the character, could I use this setup, or would you have suggestions for how to set up something like that to where I could get a little bit more variety in the characters but still share some of the animation data?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the setup. I mean, I've been on projects where we've had pieces that a player could choose from. So now he's got a hook arm instead of a regular arm, or maybe it's a tentacle or something. Usually those extra pieces would come with their own animation sets that I would set up the blends for separately. And then there would be some kind of node or hookup that would know, okay, this arm locks into the shoulder joint. So it would get its position from whatever's happening with the body, and then all the animation on the arm would be driven by that other blend tree that comes with that. It depends on how procedural you get. You could also have something where you've got dynamics driving something that goes with a set of pre-canned animations on the body, as long as you can get it to follow along and kind of hook up.
Any more questions? What was the most challenging game you worked on with regard to art, and why?
The most challenging game was a game that got canceled.
Was it the same game?
It didn't get canceled because it was challenging. I was at a studio called Adam Jack up in Seattle. It doesn't exist anymore. It was started by a bunch of guys that came over from PopCap. And we were working on a game. The working title of it was Wayward, and it was about this girl and a robot. And on screen, the girl was about this tall, and the robot was about that tall. So it was a very big size difference. And the way the game was set up, you were controlling it, and you were the girl, and then at a lot of points in the game, the girl would jump up on the robot's back, and now you're controlling the robot. And it was seamless. There was no cut between, oh, I'm going to pick her up, and that's a little video that we show, and then we do this. So they're working independently, and then they're working together, and then they're independently again. So we had blends where the girl's on her shoulder. He's basically giving her a piggyback ride the whole time. And if you go to my website, you'll see video from it, bishopanimation.com. But anyway, that was tricky because her blends and his blends had to match exactly. So that if he's running and she's on his back, that blending between the animations had to be exactly the same. And if they weren't, which they weren't originally, they would get out of sync. So what would happen is, as we're running with the robot, the girl's on his back, he would start to run, and then she would get out of sync and start bouncing all crazy. And we're like, why is this happening? And so I looked at it with one of our dev guys, John Pyle, who I still work with. He's over at Microsoft now as well. He figured out, oh, it's the blends that aren't matching up. So even though the animations were the same length, because they were blending at a different point, they were getting out of sync. Because this animation would get to this one sooner than it would on the other character. Over time, that math, those little tiny floating point things that I don't understand, would add up, and now they're completely different. So that was the most challenging. But we figured it out, and John actually wrote a tool so you could tell it to copy this blend tree's timing to this other character's blend tree, because I was writing it out by hand. I was sitting at my desk writing all the blend values down on a piece of paper and then going to the other character and then typing them in. And at the time, and still, Unity's blends are not the easiest to work with. It's very hard to see what that exact percentage is if you're trying to do that. So he saw me doing this. I had like 5 pages of notebook all written out. Because you can imagine for a game, a character's blend tree can be pretty big, the amount of animations you need. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have to copy all these down so I can write them onto the other character. He's like, oh, I can write a tool for that. So it took him like, I think an hour or something to write this thing up that saved me hours and hours of work. So talk to your dev teams, because a lot of times they can save you from hours of pain.
We love dev teams.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask another one. What was your favorite game that you worked on?
My favorite game that I worked on was probably Free Realms. Anybody know Free Realms? No? Oh, one person. Okay, great.
Yay!
I was on that game for 6 years, and when it first launched, there was a lot of pressure to make it really good. I mean, you always want a good game, but there's a lot of pressure to make it awesome, and it's got to really pay for itself, and it was a free game. So how do you make a free game pay for itself? So that was the business side. And once they moved on to other games at the studio, we were kind of given free reign to do whatever we wanted with the game. So originally we had pets that were just cats and dogs, which are boring. You can have a cat or dog in real life. So then we added unicorns and dinosaurs and cool stuff you could have as pets. And that was a lot of fun. You basically just make whatever you want and make it as entertaining as possible. We had mounts that you could ride on, and then later we added like a beach ball mount, so you're running on top of this ball, or a kangaroo mount, so you're sitting in the pouch of the kangaroo bouncing around. And there was a bat mount, so you're holding on the bat's legs, and the bat's flying frantically, and like you're water skiing through the world, kind of. That was a lot of fun.
What pet did you have?
I had all the pets because I was a dev. I could just give them all to myself. But I really liked the T-Rex pet a lot.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Did you have any raptor pets, velociraptors?
We did have velociraptors,
Okay,
yeah. And they would run like this with their tongue hanging out,
Yeah.
which was kind of fun.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Any other questions, you guys?
When did you get started with 3D art? Was it in college?
When did I get started with 3D art?
Yeah.
Last century, literally. The year was 1997. The internet did not exist in its current form. We had dial-up. If you wanted to show somebody your reel, you would put it on VHS cassette and then FedEx it to somebody. It was like $14 every time you submitted your reel somewhere. My degree is actually in graphic design, like page layout and catalog stuff, which is cool, but I didn't want to do that as a profession. I didn't have the money to switch schools. There weren't a lot of animation schools at the time either. So I just bought a bunch of books and talked to a bunch of animators and showed them my stuff. And they would say, that looks terrible. You need to fix this, this, and this. And I would make adjustments and show it to them again. And they'd say, okay, that looks better. Now you need to work on this, this, and this. And then I would just work on my skills and get better and better. And I graduated college in 1998. And by 2000, I was working on Ice Age.
Wow.
So it was quick. It was a quick progression. And I'm still not done. I mean, I've been doing this this is my 20th year now, professionally as an animator. And you're never finished. Like your skill set, you should keep looking for new challenges and getting better. I do rigging now, which I never used to do. I do much more complicated animations than I used to do. As soon as you feel like you know everything, that's when your skill set kind of stagnates and you stop progressing. So you should always feel like you don't know what you're doing.
What would you say to like starting artists or people who are just kind of dabbling on in art, even though we're doing some else in game stuff?
Learn as much stuff as you can and show your stuff to as many people that do what you want to do, and try to pay attention to the people that are giving you critiques. Sometimes it's hard to hear. Sometimes you get bad critiques, but sometimes it's justified and your work isn't very good. Like mine wasn't when I started. You just have to keep getting better, and it's like sharpening a blade, right? Like the more times over the sharpening stone, the better you get. Same thing. You just keep working on it, keep improving your skills, and you'll get where you want to be.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how did you get that job on Ice Age?
How did I get it? They needed animators, and I was available. I lived in New York. I was working at a studio, and we had a 3D users group. One of our speakers was from Blue Sky, and he said, hey, we need animators. So I applied and then quit the place where I was at and got the job there, and yeah.
Yep. So just, if you guys are interested in joining the industry, make sure when you come to events like this, talk to the speakers, talk to network, go to all the networking events, talk to everybody, because it's a very welcoming industry, and then your network will get you jobs. So that's
Yeah,
good.
and there's my contact info if anybody wants to meet up. It looks like we're out of time.
Okay.
That's what zero
All right.
end means.
Okay, now everybody clap really loud.
Thank you.